Welcome to the Word and Journey podcast, conversations with friends about stories that shape us and make us think, and some stories that are just for fun. We're busy people reading books in realistic increments. Follow along in the book and join in the conversation, or just sit back and enjoy. Our aim is to unpack the story and offer you things to ponder. Either way, thanks for being here. Welcome to the Word and Journey podcast, The Passage, Part 1. Word and Journey is conversations with friends about stories that shape us and make us think, and some that creep us out a little bit. But we have fun while it happens, because that's the wonder of a good story. Anyway, I'm Moses and or Reese, depending on which era of life you were introduced to me. And I would like to introduce you to my guest for this series, this book, Justin Nichols. Hello, good evening.
Good evening, or whenever anybody listens to this. How you doing?
Right. Yeah, very good. Thank you.
Good. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Glad you could come. Finally. We are together the way we've talked about, often doing things from different cities in busy lives. Have you noticed it's really hard to make friends as a grown-up?
Yes, increasingly harder. Not only making friends, but keeping strong friendships alive as well.
Yeah, it's hard. Yeah. So mad props to anyone who is still friends with somebody you were friends with 20, 30 years ago, especially if you don't live in the same city or state. Although I feel like sometimes I have closer connections with long distance people, sometimes, in that we actually have, because there's like a heightened intentionality that needs to happen to actually connect. And so sometimes like those connections are actually a little bit more cool. Mm-hmm. Sometimes.
Yeah. I mean, and you and I have made it, 16 years now?
Yeah, I get in there.
Yeah.
So
16 and a half.
Getting there. My goodness. Yeah, we could have a kid.
That's crazy. That's crazy.
Yeah. Anyway, so for the further uninitiated, who are you? What's your connection to books, stories? What are some interesting things about you?
Yeah, well, I'm Justin. I have enjoyed reading since I was a wee little lad in my parents' house. I remember going to book fairs as a youngster, always really, really enjoying that. The scholastic book fairs at school, they would come in and, it was awesome. Just get to choose from a whole slew of different books. It was fantastic. And then, in junior high, I used to go in the library a ton, and I kind of started sinking my teeth into bigger, thicker books in that era of my life. And ever since then, I can't go a month or so without reading something, or a week, So, yeah, I just really enjoy it. I've gone through seasons of going hard into fiction or hard into nonfiction, but for the most part, I try to balance it out where I'm doing, 3 or 4 books at a time, a couple nonfiction, a couple fiction at the same time, just ones that aren't going to be getting in the way of each other, So maybe one's a more historical nonfiction and one's like more spiritual growth. And then one of the novels is maybe some I'm reading with Melissa, my wife, or a different one can be on my own. Like something like this, The Passage. This is not something that my wife would enjoy at all.
I don't think mine either.
Yeah, it's a bit too heavy, too hectic, too dark in places. Yeah, it's a more solo book. So this is why I'm actually really glad that when you asked me which stories really resonate with you, I said The Passage, and you're like, I'd be interested in looking at that one. I was like, oh, well, sweet. I have another one who would be, willing to kind of dive in deep in this one with me.
Yeah, I'm excited for that too. Very, very quick tangent that I thought of when you were talking about book fairs, that just because I'm a sucker for nostalgia. Growing up, what was your favorite bookstore to go to?
We had this little store in Wilsonville called Christian Supply.
I remember that. Yeah.
So I liked those, but honestly, I really liked my school library and the public library. So I didn't visit a ton of bookstores as a kid, other than maybe Christian Supply here and there. And then once I think it was in middle school, probably when I first stepped foot in Powell's in Portland. I mean, that's just epic. I mean, absolutely. If anybody is listening and you haven't been to Powell's in Portland, go do it. as soon as possible. It'll blow your mind. It's like what, 4 stories, I think, 9 different
4 5 6.
rooms.
Yeah, it's huge.
It's just, a coffee shop inside. You have all these. It's incredible. Aisle after aisle after aisle.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. I forget what it's the biggest bookstore. It's either biggest bookstore in the state or the country or some large geographical area, but it's very huge. It's quite whelming.
Yeah,
So
I mean, it takes up a whole city block.
pretty much, yeah. I remember I love a good Powell's Romp, just the sheer magnitude of it all. Although I
Mhm.
find it hard to browse books there because there's just so many. I mostly just like the ambiance. I do remember though when I was a kid, more like middle school, high school, actually like going to Barnes and Noble down in Medford, Oregon.
Nice.
The Medfordites. It's the Barnes and Noble on Biddle Road. I think it's still there. The Marie Callender's nearby has burned down. This bookstore is still there. I loved the comfy couches. They had like the big cushy chairs, and we'd go as a family. I'd find a book and just curl up for hours at a time and just
Mm.
read. It was good. Good
That
times.
sounds awesome. Yeah, I don't.
Yeah.
We didn't have a really good bookstore in town, and so I remember being just a huge fan of finding little bookstores, little mom and pop kind of shops whenever I went on a trip of any kind. Whatever town we were in, whatever we were doing, visiting, I was like, oh man, I gotta visit. Just these little holes in the wall. And I'd stop in and say, oh man, what do you have here? It's usually probably like high schoolish by that point, but still, like I really enjoy it to this day. I still really like just visiting any bookstore that I'm in town when I'm in a different town.
Yeah. There's a particular smell to them that you just don't get off the Kindle.
Mm-mm. Nope.
Anyway, so the passage.
Yes.
So let's do it this way. Would you? So we read the first 6 chapters
Hmm.
as per your recommendation about how to pace ourselves through this large
Hmm.
volume. Would you give a brief narration, synopsis, summary of what happens, who we meet in these first 6 chapters, and then we will discuss lots of things about the chapters.
Sure. Absolutely. Yeah. Well, I mean, the first so 6 chapters, right? You have the first several pages, first couple dozen pages are all about Amy and Jeanette, her mom. So Amy's a little girl, and we just launch into the story of Amy and Jeanette. And I really, well, I'll get to my thoughts about it later. But anyway, you start out with the story of Amy and her mom Jeanette, and the how she came to be born, and their connection, and what happened to them. And then it takes us to a few other characters, kind of throughout each different chapter. One of them being via emails, this guy named Jonas Lear, who is let's call him a scientist. He's a virologist, and he is emailing a friend back in the States. He's on a trip down to Bolivia, and there are some very interesting things that we learn in those emails. So we kind of learn a little bit about him, his backstory, a woman that he had been with, who seemingly had passed the year before, and then we get into a guy named Wolgast, Brad Wolgast, and he's a special agent along with Phil Doyle, and we just meet these characters, and they go in kind of a backstory along with it, right? You learn all about each person, Amy and Jeanette, and you meet actually a prisoner named Anthony Carter in the midst of this as well, and everything that it's kind of bouncing around. It's the introductory kind of flavor of learning who these people are, what are they doing, what are their motivations, what are their thought processes, and who are they connected to. So yeah, we meet Brad and our special agents Brad Wolgast and Phil Doyle. They're actually going to meet Anthony Carter at a prison in Texas and basically snatching him up prior to lethal injection and taking him into a program. The program is run by this guy named Richards and Sykes. It's out in Colorado. And so Wolgast and Doyle are kind of their errand boys. Wolgast is very, very good with people. And so he is usually the one to convince the wardens or the people of the state who need to give these prisoners over to the program. And after that, we meet these sisters these nuns who actually take, well, I don't know, should I kind of spoil that?
Spoilers, what happened?
Okay. Yeah.
You can't spoil it for me because I'm reading it for the first time,
No,
but
I
we will
know.
spoil it for all of the listeners.
I know.
It's very unfair. So,
No, I just want to make sure. So basically, Jeanette leaves her daughter Amy with these nuns, and we get to meet Sister Lacey. She's as close to a protagonist as we're going to get at this point in the story so far. I think if you want to call Wolgast an anti-hero, sure, maybe protagonist, but we don't know too much more about him at this point. So I think Sister Lacey seems like she's the only one with any sort of moral center or volition to act out on. So a few more sisters: Sister Arnett, Sister Claire, and then Amy is with Sister Lacey at the zoo when we come to the close of the 6th chapter. Oh, and then we also meet Gray. Gray is kind of like what they call a sweep, aka a security guard, for lack of a better term, just keeping his eyes on these human-ish creatures that are part of this program in Colorado that they've started. So that is about where we are so far.
human-ish, that captures a lot.
Yeah.
They glow, and they have glowing eyes that show up in your dreams, which
Incredibly sharp teeth.
And incredibly sharp teeth. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So just a lovely, fun, happy little vampire story, sort of. Yes. So I've not ever read any Stephen King, although maybe we'll do that at some point. But I wonder, someone else who could maybe make a comparison of that. But yes, thank you for that narration.
Absolutely.
Lots to dwell on in the characters.
Mm-hmm.
But as a whole, like you were saying, it's an adventure story. So I guess what genre would we put this? Definitely nonfiction, just kind of science fiction-ish.
There's science fiction. I mean, there's kind of a twinge of horror with the stuff in the jungle that happened to that crew. What Gray is seeing in his dreams.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's a couple aspects of horror, drama, adventure, character study.
Drama. There's a little bit of like a psychological thriller component, or there's premonitions of that anyway.
Yeah.
I don't know. There's a lot of it.
Cast.
Definitely an ensemble cast, which I like that. I like bouncing around and seeing different people, anticipating they'll probably all come together in different ways, which is, I don't know, that's always super fun. And yes, you have Sister Lacey, who's kind of our one person who seems to be acting of her own volition in accordance with her own values for now. The Brad Wolgast, Special Agent Wolgast character, he's interesting. He seems I mean, they're all sad people, and they all carry a lot of burdens.
I think that's part of what's enduring about it, and also something I kind of enjoy is that these people have major issues, like major issues, and they each have stuff they're struggling with in one way or another. Some of them are really extreme. I mean, Gray sounds like not a good dude. Some of the stuff that he's kind of hinting at in his past, and then Sister Lacey, she has her own stuff from her past, but she's kind of apparently blocked it out of what actually happened to her in Sierra Leone. And you have so many different ways to approach these characters because there's already a rich history within each one. It's almost like, if I may be so bold so far, it's very similar, I think, to Lost at this point in the way that it develops the characters, and the flashbacks paint a really good picture of who these people are in the present. At least if you're talking about, let's just take season 1 of Lost. All these people crash on the island. They're trying to get to know each other. They all have their own issues. They all have their own problems that they're working through. They have redeeming qualities, yeah, sure, but like at the outset, you've got people fighting, people yelling, people don't know who to trust or what's going on, and then the weird stuff on the island starts happening.
Bloody polar bears, man!
I know, right? But I mean, if you look at it kind of like that, it's the ensemble. It's a lot of characters, a lot of story, a lot of connections that they may not even know about to begin with, and then we as the viewer get to see all of those things play out piece by piece by piece. So it's just I don't know. I liken it to that quite a bit.
Yeah. I feel a little bit of that twinge also, where it's a lot of, yeah, we could say like a lot of messed up people now being drawn into a shared adventure, a dark adventure, which was one of the things I loved most about Lost, and what I appreciate about similar sorts of ensemble shows is it's very we could argue Lost was very character driven. There's a lot. Lost was also very plot driven. Also, I guess there was like a strong world building component too. Okay. So it was a lot of things, but I really appreciated like the character driven nature of Lost, in that you at some point you're watching it for the characters, or you stop watching it because of the characters, because they get a little ridiculous at some point. But yeah, you fall in love with the people and you're invested in what's going to happen, and you care about them, and you feel sad when they die. Spoiler alert.
What, people died on Lost? Oh my gosh!
They were already dead.
Stop it! Stop perpetuating that.
I know. It's good. Yeah, but there's yeah. So broadly speaking, again, before, I mean, we could go in and out of like the specifics of the story, but what are some things that draw you to this particular story, given that it is a little bit dark? What draws you to a dark adventure like this?
So I didn't know too much about this story before I started reading it. I don't know if this was the exact one, but I actually remember coming across this book in one of the bookstores, whether it be Barnes and Noble or Powell's. And first of all, the author's name is Justin Cronin. I don't know if we talked about that. Justin
Yeah.
Cronin is the author. There you go. And Cronin. And he's an excellent author, but his name stood out to me. I'm Justin. Hey, there's my name. So that's easy beginning connection. But then I read the back, but that's usually not enough for me. After reading the back, I started in the book. Just read, I think it was about 2 or 3 pages. That's it. And I got to tell you, I read the first 3 pages and I was hooked. Like that was that. But with the starting out, before she became the girl from nowhere, the one who walked in, the first and last and only who lived 1,000 years, she was just a little girl in Iowa named Amy Harper Belafonte. I mean, with that first sentence or 2, like that was just it for me. And I kept reading the story about her and her mom Jeanette, and then I was just hooked. So I feel like it wasn't really, I was like searching for a book about vampires. I honestly don't read monster books at all. Like, it's not in my wheelhouse, to be honest with you. But when I started this, I'm like, oh my gosh, this writer is really talented. And the way he weaves even the first story about her and her mom, and Jeanette's dad, and the father of Amy, and their little life, and just how that came to be, I couldn't put it down. I had to have it and read it.
Yeah. I appreciated the first story quite a bit as well, and there's something about like these first 2 lines that kind of capture it. They seem like they capture the whole story and don't at all, and there's a brilliance there. But yeah, I both love and don't love like his writing style. In the story of Jenna and Amy, there's definitely a way he covers a lot of ground in a short amount of time, and he conveys like this whole history in really concise terms, but it kind of in a really beautiful, kind of flowing, almost kind of whimsical way. It'd be like, oh, here's this lady, and all of this really wretched stuff happened to her, and and so she goes, but like in this really, I know I'm making light of it, but it's actually really beautifully written. I had a little bit of a harder time with this style as it went on, because he was doing this for like multiple characters. I think by the time he got to like Gray's story, and he was, we meet Gray like on duty watching one of the vampire humanish creatures, and then it just kind of like goes into like a lot of like narrator voice talking about like, here's who he is. And I think at that point, and maybe it's because I was reading it really late at night, but that chapter felt tiring. But yeah, a lot of it is there's a pace to this story. It reads fast in a way. So it's whatever, how many multiple hundreds of pages, but it doesn't 760. Yeah, but like Les Miserables by Victor Hugo's like a similar length, and like that one feels like work to read. Good work. This one feels a little bit more fluffy, because it just, I don't know, it's written to be a little bit more exciting, a little bit more of a page turner.
Yeah, I appreciate that you said the pace. I think he writes with an incredible amount of pace and does squeeze a lot into each paragraph
Mhm.
in order to for you to get the voice of the character. And I think if you read Jeanette's, let's say 4 or 5 pages about Jeanette, and then you turn and read 4 or 5 pages about Gray, I think you'd actually find that there is a difference in voice, and I feel like there's a noticeable, I guess you could call it aloofness about Gray, that he lets things just kind of slide. He doesn't care too much about much. Like he's very he's just like, all right, well, yeah. I mean, they said I can't leave for a year. That's fine. I'll just work. It's cool. Whatever. I don't get 6 or 8 channels. That's fine. I'll just watch what I can watch. I'll watch the Discovery Channel or the Travel Channel or whatever.
Mhm.
And I feel like that
Yeah.
was really good. And in the first part of it, was very poetic. I thought the very very poetic prose. Can I read a quote?
Yeah. Sure.
So this is from Jeanette's story. It's on page 14. It says, "It seemed as if time had compressed somehow, like an accordion. All the years she had lived and everything that had happened to her were suddenly squeezed below the weight of this one moment. She remembered the early mornings when Amy was just a baby, how she'd held and rocked her by the window, often falling asleep herself. Those had been good mornings, something she'd always remember."
That is really beautiful.
I like that.
Really poetic. Yeah. As we're thinking about it too, thinking about specifically like Jeanette versus Gray. Yeah, there's a way Gray, he's very much like kind of like post life in a way. Like he's like had his crimes, had his time. He's just kind of like biding time until something happens and like not really engaged in much. And there's this very lackadaisical pace to him compared to Jeanette, who is this young single mom who's living in poverty, and there's a really high sense of urgency to her of like, gotta find a job, gotta get moving, gotta care for my baby girl. And that range of emotional engagement and that range of different conflicts is really interesting.
Hmm.
And then you get to some of these other characters. We spend a lot of time with Agent Wolgast, and he's very, I like how he's written in that he's very like present and past. He's got this current conflict. Gotta get to Anthony Carter. Gotta sell him on this thing. I've gotta like get this girl. Like WTF? Why are we kidnapping this girl? And there's at the same time as he's also wrestling through like he's divorced. He's lost a child. He's in a lot of pain, and like very. He seems like a very like unhappy dude, but with like hints of nobility, like anti-heroish qualities about him. So yeah, he's interesting. Not necessarily likable, but but still interesting and kind of relatable in a way. So
I think that's so well put. He's not completely likable, but he's interesting, you know? And he's not very, I don't know, I wouldn't call him bland as a character because there's a lot
no,
of stuff that, you know, is intriguing about him, but it's almost like you're just getting just a taste of who this guy is. And you're like, I kind of like his thought process, but I don't like his follow through or his actions. Okay, maybe he seems good with people, yet I mean, what's the ulterior motive here? I mean, so we kind of get a little taste of what he's about, and I do like his interactions with Doyle a little bit. I feel like they have like the big brother little brother dynamic, uh, in a professional realm, and then when he gets the note that now he has to go get this 6-year-old girl for this program, he has a lot of reservations, and he's not too stoked on that, you know. So that kind of that kind of says, okay, he has some conscience, but we don't know how it's going to play out because we just we just stopped at chapter 6 right when he uh, got the girl in the car.
right, yeah, I've peeked on ahead just a little bit, so
Hey.
but only a little bit. So, the other thing I was liking is I think this was in the first 6 chapters. Maybe it was a little bit of like the next one, but like so Richards, he's the guy that's running this facility, which is in Colorado. So I don't know. I read that this facility where the scientific stuff is happening is in Colorado. So I assume it's under Cheyenne Mountain next to the Stargate compound, because that's what happens in Colorado is the Stargate. But anyway, be that as it may. So I'm getting the vibe from Richards and Sykes that they're kind of the antagonists, or kind of like meant to be like the villains. I guess we'll see.
Mhm.
I guess I'm lately appreciating those stories where there's not a really clear line between hero and villain, or again, referencing Lost. I know like the Ben Linus character is like one of the most brilliant characters I think ever written, in that he's
Absolutely.
this insidious, hideous, villainous person, but like especially by the end of the show, like you understand him,
Mhm.
and you can there's ways to relate to him, and he's very much a human,
Mhm.
and even kind of likable by the end, because they bring out the complexity of, he didn't just like wake up one day and become like, evil Ben Linus. Like he was
Mhm.
once a boy who wasn't loved by his
Yeah.
father, and like you're like, oh, well, he kind of makes sense then.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
yeah. But I noticed that Justin Cronin seems to do. He seems. It seems like there's a potential that he's going to do that. I mean, I guess you know, and I don't. But we get into Richard's head, and we get to
Mhm.
see he's not just like, oh, he's like this like man in a black mask and a black coat, but I know he's running this program. He's really invested in getting the details done, and in a way has a conscience too. I mean, like he has to like off a couple people, but it's all like in service of like keeping the program running,
Mhm.
which
And keep it a secret.
yeah. So
Mhm.
which I guess I guess we'll see how that works out.
What stood out to me though about him, about Richards, is see for me, I don't know if there is a clear antagonist, a clear, you know, villain in this because yes, he has to take out those two guys, and that's terrible. That's terrible. But at the same time, he's human, and he even interacts with Sykes in a really unique way, right? He's so involved or self absorbed and involved with the program that Sykes comes into his office here and says, "What about us? Are we friends?" And Richards was like, "I hadn't even thought about that. Friends? Who cared?" You know? And he's like, "Sure." Allows himself a small smile. "Yeah, sure, we're friends." And then Sykes was like, on second thought, maybe that's not such a hot idea. Thanks anyway. It's like this really weird.
That's such a brilliant interaction.
It's so good, and it like
Yeah.
it paints them in just such this unique way because I mean they're just two dudes doing this government work, this secret thing out on a compound in the middle of nowhere in Colorado, and they have these weird weird things going on in their lab, and they're like, are we friends? Like, do we even use that word? We're just acquaintances, comrades. Like, what do we even say to each other? And so.
Yeah. Which is an interesting like human question anyway. I mean, like, especially like you live with the person, you work with the person, you see this person every day, like you're in the business all the time, but it's very possible to still like not know a person at all.
Mhm.
That feels like one of the major themes that seems to be brought out as partly character, partly world building, but all of these people feel really isolated to me.
Mhm.
It really comes out in this really desperate way with Jeanette's story. And I was telling you a little bit, like reading her story reminded me, speaking of Lemez, of Fantine,
Mm.
the mother of, oh, forgive me, I forget most of the characters' names in Lemez. I know there's Fantine and Jean Valjean
Yeah,
and
something French.
Gavroche. Yeah, but so the mother of the heroine, goes on a similar journey of like lost opportunity after lost opportunity and failure after failure and having to make concession after concession, like anything to survive. She sells her front teeth, she sells her body, she sells her hair, you know, and there's just like this absolute desperation there because she's completely resourceless. Anthony Carter is selected for the program because he has no connections.
Mhm.
Gray is selected to work for the program because he has no connections.
Yep.
Wolgast and Doyle, they're in the car together all of the time, but you kind of get the sense that they don't really know each other, like they don't interact on a deep level
Mhm.
that way. I mean, maybe they will coming up, but they kind of get the sense with Wolgast especially that at this point in his life he's got his work, he's got his buddy cop, and that's it, like nothing really bigger to live for. And by contrast, again, you see here's Sister Lacey, who does have people. She's
Mhm.
she's a she's the one who's not isolated. She
Right.
has the sister. She has her faith. She has. I mean, she's got her wounds and burdens, but she has a community net structure so that she doesn't fall apart. And
Hmm.
from within there is able to offer safety hospitality to this orphan girl,
Yeah.
and she really stands out because of that. But I don't know. I was really struck by that theme. I mean, it seems like a really relevant thing to talk about. I mean, we were like kidding a little. I don't, not kidding about like how hard it is to make friends as an adult,
Hmm.
and we have a lot of advantages and resources to do so. And it kind of helps being in a faith community, and it kind of helps
Oh yeah.
having reasonably successful social jobs. And I think we have good personalities and people like us, and it kind of helps to have gone through like a university setting and collected some friends there.
Hmm.
And so we had those resources and privileges, but like, I know a lot of people that I work with like don't have any of that. And so they're just like going through life like alone. And I'm
Hmm.
like, oh, no wonder you drink on like a porn all the time because you don't got
Yeah.
anything else. So
Yeah. No, that's the thing, man. It's a very isolated world, individualistic world that we live in, and it stems to, I guess, exacerbated by our digital lives. We think we have all these connections and friends and followers and whatnot on our on our accounts, but they're just numbers. They're just screens. It's just 2D reality, and we get more and more isolated, and it's just we no longer live in the analog. And so, to echo what you said, it is important to have these communities, whether it be faith or otherwise. But it's harder and harder to put yourself out there, even in not just hanging out with people, but talking about dating. I have several single friends who are like, "Man, it's impossible to meet anybody anymore," and I'm just, yeah, I just see so much loneliness and isolation and separateness, and I think it's just we have to combat that somehow, and so yeah, going getting involved in the faith community is huge. Finding a little home group, or the little meetups, these all help a little bit. But I
I
think
do
you're, yeah, go ahead.
faith groups or meetups, or like recovery groups. I mean, that's the other one I have some pulse on. I mean, if you happen to identify that way, but yeah,
Yeah,
it's
recovery
hard. I
groups,
guess,
support groups,
yeah, sports groups kind of. If you
support.
play, I know you said support. I said sport, like
Oh,
intramurals. Yeah, because I mean that doesn't really work for me. But I mean, I imagine some people could like participate in that some. But
yeah,
yeah, it's
nice.
hard. It's funny because I always have this cliche in my head of like, oh yeah, you want to socialize, like go join a book club or something.
Hmm.
I don't know if that actually exists in functional real life so much anymore.
Like, we're doing a book
And
club, you and I.
we are, that's kind of what this is meant to be, is like this online digital book club. Only I don't know if people are actually meeting. So I hope if you listen to the podcast, like follow the Facebook group and like try to make some friends and meet some people. We're generally nice people.
Yeah, and maybe one of these days we'll even get to record together in the same
Yeah,
room. What would
I
that be
would I
like?
would really like that. That would be amazing. I need to get some equipment then.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I was having this thought. Let me know what you think of this. Thinking about characters and components in the passage. So we've kind of pinpointed. There's not yet a clear protagonist, sort of Sister Lacey, but it sounds. Agent Wolgast is kind of getting set up as like the action's going to follow him, like him and Amy probably. But as far as an antagonist, I'm almost wondering about death in general as an antagonist,
Hmm.
because it's seeming like something that is just like kind of following everyone.
Hmm.
Like, I mean, Jeanette's father dies, that kind of catapults her into things. Wolgast, I mean, he's lost people. I mean, Carter killed somebody kind of accidentally, and there's just kind of this looming thought of like people are going to die, I mean, that's a big thing, I guess. The scientific project going on is there. This thing that happened in the jungle, like a bunch of people contracted some. It was a group of terminally ill cancer patients who contracted something in the jungle that started to restore their youth,
Hmm.
and it was unrefined or something, so they all ended up dying anyway. But that's the project, is trying to stave off death
Yeah.
through jungle-ish means. And so I don't know. It almost seems like it's a whole bunch of people versus death in this sort of story. What do you think?
That's possible, but I think you could say that about a million stories. I mean, if the author is painting his characters as those who fear death, as those who focus on and constantly think about death, then I feel like that could be an apt description of the antagonist. But I I don't get the sense that all of these characters are consumed with the thoughts of death. I feel like the right around the corner, I feel like, is this thing. You don't quite know yet what this thing is, but I think it includes death, absolutely. But I don't know if anybody yet in the story knows that this is right around the corner. I'm not even saying that just because I know what's next. I think if you look at Gray's and Richards's stories, you have those instances in both where Gray's dreaming and some really crazy, funky, twisted things are happening in his dream. And then you realize that it's one of the creatures or whatever, showing him things and talking to him in his dream. And that's not good. So there's this sense of, okay, something's going on, like in a very kind of supernatural way, that it's kind of verging on this. That's why I said there's a twinge of horror involved, because you have these, kind of bad omens, these bad thoughts that these people are thinking of. But it's not just because Gray at this point, I, he's not really thinking about death. He's just getting all twisted in the head, some from his past and then some from his present current dreams and situation.
Yeah.
And then Richards, he seems like he's just in charge of everything, and he's just like going through life playing free sale, several thousand times. And yeah, it's
all,
just like,
all that free sale. Yeah.
hey, I like free sale, but I haven't played that many games. But
Yeah.
no, it's just I don't know if that is the great looming threat that they like. We have a sense of it, but I feel like they are just going through the motions.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Yeah, it's a really interesting set of characters, and like Gray's this really interesting character because he's really this nobody character. I mean, which is like in the context of the world, part of why he is in the position he is, because he's this nobody. I mean, he's
Yeah.
convicted of a sex offense, and he has a criminal past. But current day, he's just like, he shows up, he does his job, he has no aspirations, no ambitions. He just like lives for his creature comforts, does a simple job, and has his scary dreams. And it's kind of a way. I mean, he might be the most bland of the characters at this point, but there's kind of a way, like a lot of the characters like don't really have a sense of like purpose other than just like getting onto the next thing. So I do feel excited about seeing what gets to be built on them, like having a really blank character like Gray, or like Amy. She's 6 years old and she's 6 years old and traumatized and barely speaks, but can also command polar bears to do her bidding. Or yeah, so that's amazing. It'll be fun to see these characters grow and see what they have to struggle with, what they have to overcome.
Mm-hmm.
Which again, thinking Lost was that was what one of the really compelling things is seeing these characters have to face the worst parts of themselves, and then I mean sometimes die right after.
Mm-hmm.
But then also some of them really find these really great redemptive and healing moments too.
Yeah.
Or seems like they're all offered an opportunity to become more than they are.
Mm-hmm.
Some of them take it.
Yeah. Well, and honestly, think about how often do we get to read or watch, whatever the medium, a story from the perspective of somebody who is maligned by the culture at large, and maybe for good reason too. I mean, you have this story told from the perspective of Gray, who's a registered sex offender, and he hasn't it hasn't come out like in explicit detail yet or anything like that, but it sounds like he did some pretty messed up stuff. Yet we get what, 8, 9, 10 pages or more of this guy's story and of his perspective, and it's just really unique. We have that, and then a murderer on death row. You know what I mean? Like actually seeing what from his perspective of what he's gone through, and his his version of the story of what happened when the lady was dead in the pool. Like, it's just unique how he really draws us into these moments through these characters' eyes. But a lot of times stories are told about them, very rarely from their point of view.
Yeah, that is neat. Now they mention it, getting to see these perspectives represented, and I want to say not in a way that makes them into freaks,
Mhm.
and that they're given kind of a place of significance and prominence, and yeah, you get into the perspective, and like into like the normalcy of their lives, which is kind of cool. I mean, yeah, I mean for Gray especially. I mean, if every now and then had somebody with a registered sex offense on my caseload, and I mean, those folks get no breaks at all. Society's really harsh on them, like unnecessarily so, I think. So it's nice to see, at least to get up close to one. I mean, fictional though it is.
Sure. But yeah, I think there's even the level of blandness to him, because you think about, he's in his 40s and all he's working for right now is just enough money to go travel. Like, that's all he wants. He wants to go to Bora Bora and live one of those huts. Like, that's his aspiration in life. I mean, spend a year, make a ton of money, pay your dues, get out of the states, go to Bora Bora, live in a hut, and that's the whole of life. That's the joy. That's you know what I mean. So that's all you're getting from him.
Yeah, I mean, I guess there's worse ways to go, but
Yeah, but actually, to your point earlier, that that just perpetuates his own story of isolation right there. You know, he's already been alone for so many years of his life, and then he does these terrible things, and then he's kind of shipped away, if you will, to this lonely space where he'll work out the rest of his sentence in a way that he's just watching monitors and cleaning up stuff and taking bunny rabbits into the cages and all this stuff. And then his aspiration is to go away and be alone again, but this time in a more serene, beautiful, tropical location. But it's more isolation.
yeah, he could almost be a monastic. He could almost be a really good monk, except that he doesn't have the tradition around him. So
Yeah,
that's too bad.
yeah.
But so talking again about here. So here's a story which we're drawn to. I forget who it was. So this needs to be attributed properly to somebody, and I forget who she is. But when someone says, "Hey, I like the story. I think you'll like it too," there's actually a couple of different components that people tend to latch onto that impact whether or not you'll actually like the story. I didn't say that super clearly. So when someone recommends a book to you,
Mhm.
sometimes you'll like it, sometimes you won't. Why is that? It might depend on what kind of book is being recommended to you. And so what you'll find is there are books that there's plot, there's world building, there's character, and then there's writer's voice.
Mhm.
And different books will have one, maybe two of those as a particular strength, and you'll tend to latch onto it from there. So I like Cormac McCarthy for his writer's voice, and that's just about it. um, you know the appeal to Game of Thrones was like plot and world building, and the characters were horrible. Something like Lost. Lost has like a lot of world building and character elements and plot to it too. Left Hand of Darkness by Ursula K. Le Guin, very much like a world building premise. Like, here's this world where
Mhm.
like every individual could be either gender at any time. What happens in a world like this? And it's just like exploring that question. And there's like kind of a loose plot to it. Anyway, there's those four components there. When you approach this one, Justin, what do you feel like out of like those four components? Like, what do you feel like you are most drawn to in this story?
Most drawn to I'm most drawn to the characters. I'm most drawn to the characters, absolutely. But right behind that is actually the mystery, the intrigue behind it. With a statement like the first sentence gives, that obviously tells me, okay, there's way bigger scope to this story than just telling a story. Like, there's a way bigger purpose to this story. And seeing the thickness of it, I know it's going to take me a while. Oh, and then also there's the 12, and The City of Mirrors, books 1 and 2. I mean, sorry, books 2 and 3. And so when I'm reading it, I'm completely enthralled with the way Justin Cronin draws out these characters' thoughts, memories, motivations, um, et cetera, the dialogue, all that stuff. So definitely character for me. But the mystery and intrigue is is right behind it, and I'm very impressed with the world building too. Because if you have chapter 1 being all about Amy and Jeanette, and then chapter 2 just being the emails between Jonas Lear and his buddy Paul, like in those 2 chapters alone, I am absolutely hooked on this because you have these hints of something to come through the emails that Lear sent Paul. Yet you have a wonderful way, a narrative in the first chapter with Jeanette and Amy and all the people that they came across. Right. So I would, it's a long way of saying it's definitely the characters for me, but man, the world building is super impressive. And then I'm completely intrigued by this overarching mystery behind it all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would agree with a lot of that. I'm intrigued by the characters. They're intriguing people, and I mean, sad and traumatized as they are, and I'm interested to see what they do and how they get to know each other. And I feel also drawn to the story, to the plot. I don't know. For me, not as much world building. There because it's like modern times. There's hints that it's a little bit in the future. I think said a little bit, but it's I don't know. It's like cars we know, McDonald's we know, like cell phones we know. So like I don't, not a whole lot of new stuff there, except that oh wow,
Yeah,
there's
that's
like
fair.
vampires under there's vampires on the Stargate Mountain. He's a good writer. I mean, nothing terribly special about like the narrative voice, except that it's really clean and really concise, and he really does like capture your attention really well, which I know isn't specifically like a wordsmithing thing as much as a like he knows how to structure characters and plot and introduce things really well.
Hmm.
So yes, I mean I was hooked, and I'm still hooked and intrigued. So I think it's good.
I would say he has this he has this twist of the pen that I find very evocative. I find the narrative structure very evocative. Like when Jeanette left Amy at the convent, dude, I'm I'll tell you straight up, I'm not a very emotional guy, but I was struck in the heart with how it was written. Just in terms of man, how he wrote that scene was so brilliant. Just the fact that she, dropped her off, gave her a hug, didn't want to let Sister Lacey know or let on that she wasn't going to come back. Yet this was the last time she was going to get to see her daughter, and just held on, breathed Amy in, squeezed, didn't say anything because she couldn't, like I said, she couldn't insinuate her actual purpose. And yet it just broke me, man. It was so well written and so sad. And I'm not a sucker for sad things. I like to be happy and optimistic. But the way that drew me in is so evocative, and I was really impressed. So I think that's kind of the pros of of Cronin is it's very poetic, it's evocative, it's absorbing.
Hmm. In a simple sort of way, like
Hmm.
again, kind of thinking like how Cormac McCarthy does things. I mean, like he like makes up grammatical errors to accentuate whatever he's wanting to say, and like breaks all conventions to be cool. And it's very fancy. Cronin, he's poetic and evocative, but in a really simple, like understated sort of way. Like
Hmm.
his writing style is almost invisible in that, yeah, he doesn't get in the way of his own story because
Hmm.
he writes in very, very plain language, but does just what needs to be said to bring out the emotions,
Yeah,
which is pretty smart, pretty sharp there.
very
Yes.
smart. That's a good way to say it. He doesn't get in the way of his own story. I like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, I'm also a sucker for sentimentality, nostalgia, just feeling and memories. Like it's we could have a whole podcast just about that stuff, about dreams and memories and connections with people, and how to go through life, still being mindful of the past without it ruling the present. And the way that uh, Cronin wrote this scene, I found it. I wrote the quote down, if I may, and then I'll
Yeah.
explain why. Jeanette knew she was about to cry. Something that the woman, oh, sorry, let me step back. She hugged her as long as she dared. The feeling of Amy was all around her, the warmth of her body, the smell of her hair and skin. Jeanette knew she was about to cry. Something the woman, Lacey, couldn't see, but she let herself hold Amy a moment longer, trying to put this feeling in a place inside her mind, someplace safe where she could keep it. Then she let her daughter go, and before anybody said another word, Jeanette walked from the kitchen and down the driveway to the street, and then kept right on going. So that part, dude, like trying to put this feeling in a place inside her mind, someplace safe where she could keep it. I've had moments like that where I'm like, I want to remember this forever. Like, even if I don't remember every single detail of my surroundings, I want to at least remember this feeling, this emotion, this cognitive acceptance of whatever is happening around and to me in this moment, you know? And so I get that. I feel that. Like, I would never, ever, 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 ever think about leaving Isaiah as my son, for those listening. But my gosh, like, having my own kids, I understand that sentiment right there of what she was doing in that moment. Like, if she had to do that, if she felt she had to do that, even if we disagree, if she felt she had to do that in her mind, that moment resonates like to my core.
Yeah. I agree that that's such a really powerful moment. And I'm captivated by the element in there where she's like holding on to her daughter and just like filled with the sense of her. And I'm like, yeah, like when I hug my boys, and like tonight was a night like that when I was like heading out from my office was a night when they're like, daddy, one more hug. No, daddy, one more hug. No, for real, one more hug. And I'm like, guys, I gotta go. But I'm like, yes, I want to give them one more hug. Oh my goodness.
Totally.
So other powerful moments. So one of the other moments that like still chokes me up when I think about it from the movie Interstellar.
Oh,
So
yes.
so in that story, so there's this father daughter dynamic throughout, and like the way it works out, he's leaving for space when she's still like a teenager, and she's mad at him for leaving, and so doesn't get to say goodbye properly. Like she like rebuffs him and doesn't give him a hug, and then like there's this super dramatic soundtrack, and she's like running after. She changed her mind too late, and is like running after the truck, like calling for him. He doesn't hear her, so she's like they just missed getting to like have a last hug, and I'm just like, oh, I
I know.
gotta hug my kids all of the time.
Oh,
So it's so good. The other thing I really love about that sort of moment, though, is we might very easily pass a judgment and say, oh, this single mom who had a kid out of wedlock, like left her kid, like, oh, what a lame, lazy person or whatever. But
mm,
the way that he writes her story, like you completely understand why she's doing it.
hmm
And you can completely understand why, given her lack of resources and her desperation, like, yeah, this was probably the most loving thing she
mm,
could conceive to do, like in that moment. And was it good or right? Those words are less helpful in that sort of situation. But you really get to see, like, oh yeah, people do things like that for a reason, and it's important to remember that reason.
very, very good point. I agree. And that's I can't. I think that's why I appreciate that Cronin allows us to read these stories from the perspective of different people who are, frankly, just, if they're not terrible people themselves, they've had terrible things done to them. And it's just important for us to remember that a lot of people going through hell have to make some pretty drastic choices. And, it's on us to respond with grace and mercy to folks who, man, we don't know everything that's going on in their lives. We don't know every bit of every person's story. And if we're only reacting to, let's say an isolated incident or a decision they've made that maybe impacts or affects us in a certain way, then we've missed a whole lot of it, the before. And I think that's important to remember, that everyone has a story, and some things that may seem off or weird or wrong or even terrible to us, I mean, it came from a place that in a moment, in a split second, it made sense to that person doing it, and making that decision.
Yep, very much so. So yeah, that's The Passage by Justin Cronin, part one of several more. don't know what the passage is or where it leads just yet, but I'm excited to find out.
By the way, did you notice the word "the passage" in the emails?
I did see that. Yes,
There it is.
I did see that. And so I thought, okay, that's promising. So yeah, I'll hope for more. I'm hoping for more from Jonas Lear at some point because he seems interesting. But I guess
know, me too.
No spoilers. No spoilers. Don't tell me.
Me too, because we've only heard his emails from the jungles of Bolivia, and then we only heard Richards and Sykes mention him doing a bunch of research there, like on the premises in Colorado.
Yeah.
And so I'm really curious to find out more from him, because it says like at the end of his thing where he tells that everybody just either like died or whatever, says, "I feel as if I've entered a new era of my life. What strange places our lives can carry us to. What dark passages."
Yeah.
So you have, these moments
where
we're like, oh, that doesn't sound good.
No, it's because they didn't take Jennifer Lopez to fight off the anacondas. That's why they all died.
Oh man.
Okay, forgive me for that one. Anyway,
no, I forgive you.
Okay. Okay, we'll reiterate this in other episodes. But if a listener because we have to go to bed now. If a listener wanted to reach out to you, where can you be found in the world or on the internets?
If they want to reach out to me, I am on Instagram and Facebook. You can look me up, Justin Nichols, and I'm on. I have an old blog I wrote years ago. I haven't touched it in years. justinnichols.blogspot.com. Like I said, I haven't written on that in a while. YouTube channel I occasionally post on, and my website. I'm a pastor at a church, Grace Chapel. So you go to gracechapelonline.org/soul-care. So I'm pastor of Soul Care. So all sorts of places. I don't, you can find me in all those places. I don't think I have any of them on private. So you can just go follow me and stalk me if you want.
Very nice. Yes. So you can find Nick's there. And then if you're following us, following the passage. So we read chapters 1 through 6 here. And what's next? 7 through 10, 14? What did you say?
I'll look at it. I think it's to the end of the first section, because there are a bunch of different sections and or parts, I should say. So we're in the middle of part 1. So it's just the end of part 1, and it goes to.
I think he said we'll go through chapter 14 for this one.
Yeah, so. It's chapter 14. You're correct. Yeah.
Okay. So if you, the listener, would like to read along with us and like to be ready for next time, read 7 through 14. And
yeah, I think they should. Absolutely.
I think they should. Yes. No homework required. And because that's dumb. Anyway, but feel free to drop us a line on the Facebook discussion group. We'll bring stuff up there, and also leave us reviews and dollars on Patreon, because it costs money to do this.
Yeah, and on Facebook, tell us like who's your favorite character so far. Who do you like? Who do you dislike? Who's easy to like understand, even if you disagree with what they've done or said? Who's easiest to understand? And what resonates about the story so far?
All right, you have your mission, and we'll see you next time. Goodbye. Good night. Word and Journey is a podcast by Moses Bernabe. If you like what you hear, consider supporting the show with dollars, reviews, or shares, or all of the above. Word and Journey can be found on most major podcast platforms and on my author Patreon at patreon.com/Moses Bernabe. Moses Bernabe can be found at mosesbernabe.com. Contact info for my most excellent co-hosts can be found in the liner notes. The podcast logo was designed by TJ Todd, with additional development by Moses Bernabe. The theme music is by Aaron Esparza. This episode was mastered by Breakfast Puppies. Thanks for listening, and see you next time.